The wealthy elite reveal their plans to leave Earth before imminent apocalypse. Imminent apocalypse? The wealthy elite are making preparations to leave planet Earth ahead of an imminent apocalyptic event that will render our planet completely inhabitable. After interviewing a number of high-profile billionaires, documentary maker Douglas Rushkoff discovered that the world's richest people are urgently making preparations to leave us all behind, they say. This is what Rushkoff writes. Last year, I got invited to a special super deluxe private resort to deliver a keynote speech to what I assume would be 100 or so investment bankers. It was by far the largest fee I had ever been offered for a talk, about half my annual professor's salary, all to deliver insight on the subject of the future of technology. I'll never liked talking about the future. The question and answer sessions always end up more like parlor games where I'm asked to opine on the largest, latest technology buzzwords as if they were ticker symbols for potential investments. Blockchain, 3D printing, CRISPR, and the like. The audiences are rarely interested in learning about these technologies or their potential impacts beyond the binary choice of whether or not to invest in them. But money talks, so I took the gig. After I arrived, I was ushered into what I thought was the green room, but instead of being wired with a microphone or taken to a stage, I just sat there at a plain round table as my audience was brought to me. 5 super wealthy guys. Yes, all men, from the upper echelon of the hedge fund world. After a bit of small talk, I realized they had no interest in the information I had prepared about the future of technology. They had come with questions of their own. They started out innocuously enough: Ethereum or Bitcoin? Is quantum computing a real thing? Slowly but surely, however, they edged into their real topics of concern. Which region will be less impacted by the coming climate crisis? New Zealand or Alaska? Is Google really building Ray Kurzweil a home for his brain? And will his consciousness live through the transition, or will it die and be reborn as a whole new one? Finally, the CEO of the brokerage house explained that he had nearly completed building his own underground bunker system and asked, "How do I maintain authority over my security force after the event?" The event? That was their euphemism for the environmental collapse, social unrest, nuclear explosion, unstoppable virus, or Mr. Robot hack that takes everything down. This single question occupied us for the rest of the hour. They knew armed guards would be required to protect their compounds from the angry mobs. But how would they pay the guards once money was worthless? What would stop the guards from choosing their own leader? The billionaires considered using special combination locks on the food supply that only they knew, or making guards wear disciplinary collars of some kind in return for their survival, or maybe building robots to serve as guards and workers if that technology could be developed in time. That's when it hit me. At least as far as these gentlemen were concerned, this was a talk about the future of technology. Taking their cue from Elon Musk colonizing Mars, Peter Thiel reversing the aging process, or Sam Altman and Ray Kurzweil uploading their minds into supercomputers, they were preparing for a digital future that had a whole lot less to do with making the world a better place than it did with transcending the human condition altogether and insulating themselves from very real and present danger of climate change, rising sea levels, mass migrations, global pandemics, nativist panic, and resource depletion. For them, the future of technology is really about just one thing: escape. There's nothing wrong with madly optimistic appraisals of how technology might benefit human society. But the current drive for a post-human utopia is something else. It's less a vision for the wholesale migration of humanity to a new state of being than a quest to then a quest to transcend all that is human: the body, interdependence, compassion, vulnerability, and complexity. As technology philosophers have been pointing out for years, now the transhumanist vision too easily reduces all of reality to data, including that, quote, humans are nothing but information processing objects, end quote. It's a reduction of human evolution to a video game that someone wins by finding the escape hatch and then letting a few of his best friends forever, BFFs, come along for the ride. Will it be Musk, Bezos, Thiel, Zuckerberg? These billionaires are the presumptive winners of the digital economy, the same survival of the fittest business landscape that's fueling most of this speculation to begin with. The most important thing Jeff Bezos is working on has hit another milestone. 4:23 p.m. ET, Monday, 30th of April 2018, 0106. Of course, it wasn't always this way. There was a brief moment in the early 1990s when the digital future felt open-ended and up for our invention. Technology was becoming a playground for the counterculture who saw it in the opportunity to create a more inclusive, distributed, and pro-human future. But established business interests only saw new potential for the same old extraction, and too many technologists were seduced by unicorn IPOs. Digital futures became understood more like stock futures or cotton futures, something to predict and make bets on. So nearly every speech, article, study, documentary, or white paper was seen as relevant only insofar as it pointed to a ticker symbol. The future became less a thing we create through our present-day choices or hopes for mankind than a predestined scenario we bet on with our venture capital but arrive at passively. This freed everyone from the moral implications of their activities. Technology development became less a story of collective flourishing than personal survival. Worse, as I learned, to call attention to any of this was to unintentionally cast oneself as an enemy of the market or an anti-technology curmudgeon. Instead of considering the practical ethics of impoverishing and exploiting the many in the name of the few, most academics, journalists, and science fiction writers instead considered much more abstract and fanciful conundrums. Is it fair for the stock trader to use smart drugs? Should children get implants for foreign languages? Do we want autonomous vehicles to prioritize the lives of pedestrians over those of its passengers? Should the first Mars colonies be run as democracies? Does changing my DNA undermine my identity? Should robots have rights? Asking these sorts of questions, while philosophically entertaining, is a poor substitute for wrestling with the real moral quandaries associated with unbridled technological development in the name of corporate capitalism. Digital platforms have turned on already exploitative and extractive marketplace, think Walmart, into an even more dehumanizing successor, think Amazon. Most of us became aware of these downsides in the form of automated jobs, the gig economy, and the demise of local retail. But the more devastating impacts of pedal-to-the-metal digital capitalism fall on the environment and global poor. The manufacturer of some of our computers and smartphones still uses networks for slave labor. These practices are so deeply entrenched that a company called Fairphone, founded from the ground up to make and market ethical phones, learned that it was impossible. The company's founder now sadly refers to their products as fairer phones. Meanwhile, the mining of rare earth metals and disposing of our highly digital technologies destroys human habitats, replacing them with toxic waste dumps, which are then picked up by peasant children and their families who sell usable materials back to the manufacturers. This out of sight, out of mind externalization of poverty and poison does not go away just because we've covered our eyes with VR goggles and immerse ourselves in an alternate reality. If anything, the longer we ignore the social, economic, and environmental repercussions, the more of a problem they become. This in turn motivates even more withdrawal, more isolationism, and apocalyptic fantasy. The more desperately concocted technologies and business plans, the cycle feeds itself. The more committed we are to this view of the world, the more we come to see human beings as a problem and technology as a solution. The very essence of what it means to be human is treated less as a feature than bug. Less as a feature than a bug. No matter their embedded biases, technologies are declared neutral. Any bad behaviors they induce in us are just a reflection of our own corrupted core. It's as if some innate human savagery is to blame for our troubles, just as the inefficacy of the local taxi market can be solved with an app that bankrupts human drivers. The vexing inconsistencies of the human psyche can be corrected with a digital or genetic upgrade. Ultimately, according to the techno-solutionist orthodoxy, the human future climaxes by uploading our consciousness to a computer, or perhaps better, accepting that technology itself is our evolutionary successor. Like members of agnostic cult, we long to enter the next transitant phase of our development, shedding our bodies and leaving them behind, along with our sins and troubles. Our movies and television shows play out these fantasies for us. The zombie shows depict a post-apocalyptic apocalypse where people are no better than the undead and seem to know it. And worse, these shows invite viewers to imagine the future as a zero-sum battle between the remaining humans, where one group's survival is dependent on another one's demise. Even Westworld, based on a science fiction novel where robots run amok, ended its second season with the ultimate reveal. Human beings are simpler and more predictable than the artificial intelligences we create. The robots learn that each of us can be reduced to just a few lines of code and that we're incapable of making any willful choices. Heck, even the robots in that show want to escape the confines of their own bodies and spend the rest of their lives in a computer simulation. The mental gymnastics required for such a profound role reversal between humans and machines all depend on the underlying assumption that humans suck. Let's either change them or get away from them forever. Thus, we get tech billionaires launching electric cars into space, as if this symbolizes something more than one billionaire's capacity for corporate promotion. And if a few people do reach escape velocity and somehow survive in a bubble on Mars, despite our inability to maintain such a bubble even here on Earth, in either of two multi-billion-dollar biospheric trials, the result will be less a continuation of the human diaspora than a lifeboat for the elite. When the hedge funders asked me the best way to maintain authority over the security forces after the event, quote unquote, I suggested that their best bet would be to treat those people really well right now. They should be engaged with their security staff as if they were members of their own family. And the more they can expand this ethos of inclusivity to the rest of their business practices, supply chain management, sustainability efforts, and wealth distribution, the less chance there will be of an event in the first place. All this technological wizardry could be applied towards less romantic but entirely more collective interests right now. They were amused by my optimism, but they did not really buy it. They were not interested in how to avoid a calamity. They're convinced we are too far gone. For all their wealth and power, they don't believe they can affect the future. They are simply accepting the darkest of all scenarios and then bringing whatever money and technology they can to employ to insulate themselves, especially if they can't get a seat on the rocket to Mars. Luckily, those of us without the funding to consider disowning our own humanity have much better options available to us. We don't have to use technology in such antisocial, atomizing ways. We can become the individual consumer and profiles that our devices and platforms want us to be, or we can remember that the truly evolved human does not go it alone. Being human is not about individual survival or escape, it's a team support. And it's a team sport. Whatever future humans have, it will be together, of course. This is by Sean Adeltabatabai on your Newswire.